Today's lesson is Nargis Mohammadi, the Nobel winner defying tyranny. Hi, everybody. My name is Roger.
And I'm Mike.
And today we're talking about a person from Iran by the name of Nargis Mohammadi. She has won the Nobel Prize, so she is the Nobel winner, but she is defying tyranny. She's fighting against tyrannical governments like the one in Iran, and she's not really doing quite well. I think they keep putting her in jail, but at least her voice has been heard.
Absolutely, and of course, winning the Nobel Peace Prize for 2023 will make sure her name spreads far beyond Iran and people who know about her struggle. Now everyone knows about it, and this hopefully will put more pressure on the Iranian government to do the right thing and release her and keep her safe, because she is doing good work, but dangerous work, in defying tyranny. When you defy something, you're basically saying, no, I won't follow your rule. I'm going to go against your rule. In her case, she believes that the rules are unfair, they're wrong, they are used to control people and limit their freedom, or she's basically fighting against tyranny, fighting against someone who wants to limit your freedom and control what you say, do, think, believe. Tyranny is something we think of dictators having or evil kings having. There is no protection from the law if you're living under a tyranny. If someone powerful doesn't like you, well, that's about it. You're going to end up in jail and having your life ruined. There's probably not democracy. There's not free speech. There is very much a lot of control over what people say, think, or do. But she's fighting against that. She's trying to bring more freedom to Iran, to all of the people of the country, and especially to the women of the country. So let's check out her struggle and her story in Nargis Mohammadi, the Nobel winner defying tyranny. Nargis Mohammadi, the Nobel winner defying tyranny. When the 2023 Nobel Peace Prize was announced last October, it was unclear at first whether the winner was even aware of the recognition. As grim evidence of the hardships she faces, the new Nobel laureate, Nargis Mohammadi, was locked away in Iran's notorious Evin prison and may not have heard the news for some time.
大家好，第一部分我们来看标题单字 defy。这个动词的意思是违抗或是反抗。例如 Jane defied her parents by staying out past her curfew. Jane 违抗父母，在外逗留到超过门禁时间。又或者说 Your decision to skip school on exam day defies all logic. 你在考试当天翘课的决定有违常理。接下来是 grim， 它是形容词，指的是严峻的或是令人担忧的，也可以是令人沮丧的意思。例如 The film was about how grim life was in Europe during World War I. 该部电影讲述了在第一次世界大战期间，欧洲的生活是多么的严峻。或是 Terry came out of the 3-hour meeting with a grim expression on his face. Terry 从那场开了3个小时的会议出来，一脸愁云惨雾。再来看到名词 hardship， 它的意思是艰苦、艰难或是贫困。例如 My mother had a lot of hardships in her childhood, but she became a very successful doctor. 我妈妈童年时历经许多艰难，但是她成为一个很成功的医师。再看一个例子 Matt suffered many hardships after losing his job. Matt 在失业之后吃了很多苦。
Okay, it's time for us now to discuss the first part of our lesson. Again, we're talking about Nargis Mohammadi, and she's won the Nobel Prize, and she's defying tyranny. And here in the first paragraph it says, when the 2023 Nobel Peace Prize was announced last October, it was unclear at first whether the winner was even aware of the recognition. So, of course, if you've won the Nobel Peace Prize, you'll probably find out about it right away. They'll contact you or you'll hear about it in the news. But in this particular case, we're not quite sure whether the winner from last year was even aware of this recognition. She probably didn't know that she was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize because she was in jail, and the people who are supervising her there, her jailers, probably did not want her to know this.
No, I'm sure she doesn't get a regular newspaper delivery. She doesn't have access to the internet. She is locked up in jail. So yes, this happened, and as the news flashed around the world, she was unable to hear about it, at least for a while. As grim evidence of the hardships she faces, the new Nobel laureate, Narges Mohammadi, was locked away in Iran's notorious Evin prison and may not have heard the news for some time. She's in jail. She's locked up in this prison, I believe in Tehran, the capital of Iran. And this is grim evidence of the hardships she faces. You would think, yes, if someone won the Nobel Prize, they would find out very soon. They would get a phone call. Someone would call them. They'd see it on the news. They'd get a message alert on their phone. But she got none of that. And that is grim evidence of the difficulties that she faces. Grim evidence. Something grim is kind of bad news. It's very dark. It's very sad or unhappy, very depressing. If someone has grim news for you, don't expect good news. Expect it to be shocking or horrible or bad in some kind of way. If there was a very grim scene at the accident, well, it was a very violent accident. People were hurt and killed, and it wasn't a happy thing where people just got up and walked away. No, it was very negative, bad, or harmful to people or things. So this is grim evidence. This is very clear and sad evidence of the hardships she faces, the difficulties she faces. Someone who's fighting for human rights in a tyranny, in a country where there is no freedom, this is a very difficult thing to do, and being locked in jail for it is very difficult. She can't see her family. She can't see her children, her friends. She has no control over her life, and who knows what horrible things might happen to her in jail. So this is a life of great hardship for her, at least for now, but we hope for better in the future.
Right, so again, we've got this grim evidence. It's bad, it's terrible. I could say, for example, if you want to buy a house, well, the housing market is quite grim right now. There aren't a lot of buildings available, and the prices are very high, so it's a grim market out there. And again, she's facing all these hardships, these difficulties. And so as grim as those problems are, even though it's a very bad situation, the new Nobel laureate was locked away again in this notorious prison. If you're locked away, of course, you could be locked up. We also use that phrase. And if something's notorious, it's usually famous for a bad reason. Okay, we could say that Los Angeles is notorious for its large homeless population. There's lots of people in Los Angeles who don't have homes. Okay, that brings us to the end of the first part of our lesson for today. Let's listen now to the second part.
Honored by the Nobel Committee for her fight against the oppression of women in Iran and her fight to promote human rights and freedom for all, Mohammadi began her human rights activism 32 years ago while attending Qazvin International University. In addition to earning a degree in physics there, she also co-founded a political student group and wrote articles in support of women's rights for the student newspaper. It was also at the university that she met her husband, a pro-reform journalist named Tahi Rahmani.
第二部分我们看到名词 oppression， 这个字的意思是压迫、压制或是欺压。例如 It's hard for people living in democratic countries to understand the oppression from dictatorial nations. 生活在民主国家的人们很难理解在独裁国家受到的压迫。或是The news revealed the oppression of workers in this company. 该新闻揭露了这家公司对员工的压迫。
All right, we are back, and we're learning more about Narges Mohammadi, the 2023 Nobel Peace Prize winner. Let's find out exactly what she did to, A, get in trouble, and also, B, to win the Nobel Peace Prize. Honored by the Nobel Committee for her fight against the oppression of women in Iran and her fight to promote human rights and freedom for all, Mohammadi began her human rights activism 32 years ago while attending Qazvin International International University. Wow, so she has been at it for a very long time, since she was basically a young woman, a university student. This is how she was honored by the Nobel Committee. The committee is this group of esteemed people, widely respected people who look at different activists, different people fighting for human rights and things around the world, fighting for peace around the world, and they basically pick someone who they think has done a lot of good work, someone who they think could benefit from having more international attention and things like that. So once they pick the person, they kind of put out a statement explaining why this person was the one they chose to honor. In her case, she was honored for her fight against the oppression of women in Iran. Yes, if you've been paying attention to the news, you would know that a few months ago, and for quite a long time before that, there had been big protests in Iran, often led by women and young people, young men, young women, fighting for more rights for women in Iran. I believe in Iran, women don't have many rights. Of course, they have to dress in certain ways. And when one woman who was sort of arrested for exposing her hair was taken to jail, she was killed, or she died in jail. And some people said she was beaten up by the police in jail. And this prompted some of these latest protests. And people were protesting the oppression of women. When you sort of stop people from having rights, when you take their rights away, when you try to limit their profile, their appearance in public, and you control what they say or do or even think, this is oppression. If someone takes away your right to vote, your right to work, your right to make your own decisions, that is oppression, political oppression. And of course, this is why they have refugees leaving countries, because they don't have freedom or political rights. So this is the oppression of women in Iran and her fight to promote human rights and freedom for all. So not just issues that affect women, issues that affect all people. I believe she would probably want a democratic Iran, free votes in Iran, people, the ability to elect their own leaders, and not having these religious leaders that they've had for many, many years. She began her activism 32 years ago. She is a human rights activist. The work that she does, making speeches, organizing protests, publishing papers and things like that, that is her actual work as an activist. That is her activism. So if you're out there organizing people in order to support some right or some freedom that you believe in, you are engaged in activism. And she started doing this stuff 32 years ago, like a lot of people might have, when she began attending university, the Qazvin University in Iran.
Okay, and in addition to earning a degree in physics there, she also co-founded a political student group and wrote articles in support of women's rights for the student newspaper. So here she's done a couple of things. In addition to one thing, she also did something else. So in addition to getting her degree in physics, physics, of course, is the study of how things move and their relationship to each other. Physics has to do with different kinds of machines and things like that. And physics, of course, is very important when we talk about the universe and gravity and how bodies move around in the universe. It all has to do with physics. So in addition to getting that degree in physics, she also co-founded a political student group. If you co-found something, you establish it with one or more people. So this was a political student group. They organized this. She worked together with some other people, and she wrote articles in the student newspaper in support of women's rights. So that's kind of where she got her start there when she was going to university.
It was also at the university that she met her husband, a pro-reform journalist named Tahi Ramani. So there at university, again, like many people do, she met the man that she ended up marrying, this pro-reform journalist by the name of Tahi Ramani. So he's involved in similar work to her. He is a journalist, so he writes for a newspaper or a magazine. He writes articles, but also he is an activist in some kind of way because he is pro-reform. He wants reform. He believes reform, political reform, social reform, legal reform in Iran would be a good thing. So her ideas of more freedom and democracy and freedom of speech and protection of the law under the law, all of those he also believes would be good. Allow more freedom for more people.
Okay, we're at the end of the second part of our lesson for today. Let's move on now to the third part.
After graduating from university, Mohammadi began her own career in journalism, writing for Payami Harjar, a magazine dedicated to women's issues. In a country with greater freedom, such work might have seemed unremarkable. However, by simply writing openly about women's rights and human rights in Iran, Mohammadi effectively became both a critic and target of Iran's fundamentalist authoritarian government.
第三部分看到片语 be dedicated to 名词，指的是投注时间、精力于……或是奉献于。例如 Adele is dedicated to this research and hopes to get some achievements. Adele 致力于这项研究，希望能获得一些成果。或是 Joe is dedicated to wildlife conservation. Joe 致力于野生动物保育。下一个是形容词 unremarkable， 指的是普通的、一般的或是平常的。例如 Though it looked unremarkable at first glance, the small hill contained buried treasure. 虽然乍看之下并不起眼，但这座小山里却埋藏着宝藏。再来介绍名词 critic， 指的是反对者、批评者或是评论员。举例来说 The proposal has a lot of supporters as well as a few critics. 这个提案有很多人支持，同时也有一些反对者。或是The band's new album was praised by most music critics. 该乐团的新专辑受到大部分的音乐评论家赞赏。最后来看到 authoritarian， 这个形容词表示独裁的或是专制的。举例来说 The nation is ruled by an authoritarian dictator. 这个国家是由一位专制独裁者统治。最后一个例子 The movie is about rebels fighting an authoritarian government. 这部电影是关于对抗独裁政府的叛乱分子。
Okay, here it says, after graduating from university, Mohammadi began her own career in journalism writing for Payami Har Jar, a magazine dedicated to women's issues. Okay, so she graduated from university and then she began her own career in journalism. She became a reporter, she became a journalist, and she was writing for a magazine that was especially dedicated to women's issues. So, of course, we've got lots of publications out there that are dedicated to different ideas, okay? Some magazines, for example, are dedicated to liberal politics. Some may be dedicated to conservative politics. Some may be dedicated to religion or whatever. In this particular case, the magazine focused on women's issues. That's what the magazine mainly wrote about.
Exactly, and that would be a pretty normal journalism job in any other country, but of course this is Iran. So in a country with greater freedom, such work might have seemed unremarkable. Yeah, absolutely. If this is a woman doing this job in Taiwan, writing for a magazine that's focused on women's issues and things that affect women's lives, this would be unremarkable. It wouldn't be interesting at all. It would be sort of unsurprising, not special, nothing that would get her in trouble or anything in any way. If something is unremarkable, it's basically normal. It's common. It's not a strange thing. It's the type of thing you see every day. But remember, this is Iran. However, by simply writing openly about women's rights and human rights in Iran, Mohammadi effectively became both a critic and target of Iran's fundamentalist authoritarian government. All we have to do is think about someone who is writing about freedom of speech and the benefits of democracy. If you are writing about that in Taiwan, no one would really notice. If you are writing about that stuff in China, people would definitely notice, and you might definitely be getting yourself in trouble. So by writing openly about this stuff, she's not doing it on sort of hidden secret websites that only people who are interested in the topic know about. No, she's doing this so anyone in public can read these articles. She's writing about human rights. She's writing about women's rights. So by doing this so publicly, she effectively became both a critic and a target of Iran's fundamentalist authoritarian government. She is a critic. That's what she's doing. She is criticizing things. A critic is someone whose job, or at least whose writing, is criticizing things, is pointing out problems in things. You could be a restaurant critic, and you go to a restaurant and you tell people who haven't been there the good and the bad things things about the restaurant, what you liked, what you didn't like, what you thought was excellent, what you believed needed to be improved. If you're a movie critic, you will do the same thing. Often critics have some kind of knowledge and education in the subject that they're talking about. You know, the food critic might have been a chef. The movie critic might have studied film theory and film history. And they're giving us their sort of educated opinion on things and pointing out problems. And political critics, social critics will do the same things, you know, talk about problems caused by sexism or racism or ageism or things like that in society and how they think things can be made better. Now, that is a pretty normal job, right? You can open up any newspaper here in Taiwan and someone will be saying, oh, I think the DPP is doing this wrong or the KMT needs to improve that. And people read it and they're interested. But when you're doing it in a fundamentalist authoritarian country like Iran, this can get you in big trouble.
Right, so she's a critic of the authoritarian government, and if a government is authoritarian, you've got authorities running things, and you have to do what they say. You have to obey them, and if you don't, you get in big trouble. We've got many authoritarian countries all over the world, like Cuba and North Korea, etc., etc. They're all authoritarian. You've got people basically governing without letting the people vote in elections. They don't have freedom of speech and things like that. And yes, indeed, Iran is the Islamic Republic of Iran. So yes, indeed, you need to be a Muslim there. If you're not, you could be in very big trouble. It is an authoritarian government. And again, she's a critic of that government, but of course they don't like her, so she's a target of them. And as a result, she has spent some time in jail, and I think she's in jail right now as well. Okay, we're at the end of our lesson for today. Here comes Hanny.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文第二部分的第一句提到，穆罕默迪在伊朗对抗妇女受到压迫，以及为所有人争取人权和自由而奋斗，因而受到诺贝尔委员会表彰。那文中用到单字 oppression 来表达压迫、压制。那它是来自动词 oppress， 我们来学习它的字首字根。好 ，P-R-E-S-S press 这个字根呢，它表示挤压或者是推的意思。那在 oppress 这个字当中，它的字首 op 是来自 ob， 表示对抗或是反向。那么 press 表示压。当我们把某一股势力反向的压回去，应该很容易联想到 oppress 它有压迫、压制的语义。我们顺便补充两个有相同字根的单字。第一个是 compress， 它的字首 com表示完全或一起， press 是挤压，把东西全部挤压在一起，应该可以联想到 compress 它有压缩、压紧的意思。如果在字尾加上 or 变成 compressor， 那就可以表示压缩机。第二个补充的是 depress， 它的字首 de 表示 down， 就是往下， press 表示压迫。那同学们可以试着联想，在背重物的时候，那个东西会把我们的身体往下压，让我们感到沉重。那同样的，如果是负面的情绪压住我们，心情就会很沮丧，让人意志消沉嘛。所以我们可以去想说 depress 这个动词就可以表达使沮丧、使消沉的意思咯。同样在课文第二部分最后一句写到， It was also at the university that she met her husband... 也是在大学里她遇到了她的丈夫... 那这边她其实用到分列句来强调 at the university。 那这边我们来学习分列句的句型。要强调句子里面的某部分时，常常会使用分列句。那它的步骤是把原本句子里面要强调的部分摆在 it is 和 that 之间，或者是 it was 和 that 之间。那强调的部分呢，可以是你原本句子里面的主词、受词、时间副词或是地方副词等等。那接着呢，再把句子其他部分摆到 that 之后，也就是说它的句型是 it is 或是 it was 加上强调的部分 that 再加句子其余的部分。举例来说， He became interested in photography in college。 那我们现在要用分列句来强调 in college， 句子就会写作 It was in college that he became interested in photography。正是在大学的时候，他对摄影产生了兴趣。好，那补充一下，如果强调的部分是人，那分列句里面的 that 也可以改用 who 或是 whom 表示。 who 是主格， whom 是受格。举例来说， It was Sarah who told him the secret, not me. 是 Sarah 把秘密告诉他的，不是我啦。好，那么以上就是今天重点整理，我们回顾今天单字吧。
Defy. Activists defy unfair rules, speaking up for what's right and aiming for positive change. Grim. Dr. Ballard delivered grim news about the patient's condition. Hardship. Amelia's family has faced significant hardship due to her father's job loss. Notorious. The city's downtown area was once notorious for its high crime rate. Physics. Physics is a field of study that explores the behavior and properties of matter and energy. Unremarkable. The movie was rather unremarkable, lacking any surprises or excitement. Critic. As a fierce critic of the city's government, Mrs. Hopkins has often taken part in protests against specific policies.
Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of our program, and please make sure you join us again next time. From all of us here, I am Mike.
I am Roger. See you next time.